Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Welcome to November edition of Health is Wellness. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here on the Saturday morning early. Thanks again. Thanks for sticking around. We getting started just a couple minutes late, but you all are going to want to stick around for this episode. Really, really exciting things that we're going to learn today. So excited about our guests that we're going to have in studio. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone has had a great week. This holiday week that it is, everybody gets to take the time off and spend it with their families. I hope that you all had some truth telling around that table on Thursday, and was able to share maybe with your family members, maybe whether or not you're living on Indigenous land, or maybe whether or not the story, the whitewash story that was told to us in school and growing up here in the United States, about what Thanksgiving really is. So I hope that you all have spent the last few days really being thankful for what you have, your friends, your family. I know this has been a rough year for all of us. All of us have experienced loss in some way, and really being thankful for the present. Really being thankful for those loved ones that are available to reach out to, maybe loved ones that you get to hug for the first time in a while, 18 months. So this episode is an extension of how thankful we are, how thankful I am as a plant medicine advocate. It's important for me to understand the history of plants as medicine. And so I knew that the Saturday after Thanksgiving, the Saturday after National Day of Mourning, the Saturday after this country celebrates so much, of being thankful and grateful for what we have. I was hoping that we could have a frank conversation, an honest conversation, with a woman that I admire very, very much, and her colleague, who I am excited about meeting today. But I wanted to give thanks to our indigenous tribes here in the United States, in the Americas, we can say. Those were the people and communities and families that were living here when Christopher Columbus claimed that he discovered America, which is kind of hard. If somebody was already living here, you kind of didn't discover anything. But um, has been the influence on those tribes and how we view plant medicine and what plant medicines we have available to us in this part of the world, and in this part of the country. So I live in Las Vegas, in Nevada, and there are a lot of indigenous influences, I would say, in this part of the country, more than what I saw in Georgia. Even though I was living in Muskogee County in Columbus, Georgia, which I know the Muskogee Indians were driven out of Atlanta and pushed further south, and that's kind of where they ended up, or one of the many places that they ended up. But I hopefully wanted to share with you today, some indigenous tribe stories and a little bit more about, well, peyote as plant medicine, if you're not familiar with that, and of course cannabis and hemp, and how the colonists even knew how to grow cannabis and hemp here in the United States. And so I'm excited today to have you all be a part of this conversation. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, we're going to get started with our first guest who is here to join us today, Miss Mary Jane Oatman. Hello, beautiful. Hi.
Hello. It's such an honor to join you all.
Hi, dear. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much to Minorities for Medical Marijuana and just all of the wonderful people out there wanting to learn more about Indigenous connections with plant medicine and how we are continuing to heal ourselves and our brothers and sisters with the gifts of Mother Earth.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this conversation. I don't think Gary's with us just yet, but that's okay because we have a lot to cover, Miss Mary Jane. I would like for you to introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Well, Himakas Katsiya Nunam Hanyawa Piamsa Kanawatas Pa Oikoloti Token. First, I have to give thanks to our creator for gathering us all before letting everybody know. Mary Jane Oatman, I am coming to you all live from the ancestral homelands of my people, the Nez Perce people in present-day Idaho. Our Aboriginal homelands span across Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Montana, where we had, a very robust relationship with the gifts and resources of Mother Earth. And fast forward to today, and I feel really blessed to be in this capacity as the executive director of the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, working to elevate the protection of tribal sovereignty and the reclamation. And a big part of it is just our people are not giving themselves the permission to heal, and so we have to definitely lower that stigma bar so that our people can see the healthy benefits from plant medicines that have just been, tucked away in little closets all across beautiful communities. And so THC Magazine is what we do with our education and advocacy platform at the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition, so that we can bridge the successful communities that have already work towards that, the regulation and the compliance, the safety measures, so that we can integrate that plant medicine back into our family systems.
Yeah, it's so vital. And we know that when we look at the endocannabinoid system, and we also look at the history of hemp in just our daily lives and daily routine. Most of the animals that we were eating hemp as their feed, right? So we were getting that through consuming those animals, but also just because hemp was used more because it was grown more. But I'd like you to, if you could, step back and give us a little bit of a history lesson, a little bit of a timeline, if you would. Your ancestors that you've tracked the timeline and the family line, and you all, or did your ancestors directly connect with any of the colonizers that came from Europe during that time? Was there any affiliation, would I say, with hemp and cannabis specifically, and maybe what your ancestors knew or maybe taught to those new people that came to your land?
Oh, most definitely. Thank you so much for that question, because I think it also allows us to kind of see the dichotomy between the East and the West. So the first contact that my people, the Nez Perce people, had here, west of the Mississippi, was not until 1805. And so the first European exposure that our people had directly was in 1805. And so we have in the Pacific Northwest very many of our indigenous cultures that have maintained very strong traditional and cultural ties, because those few hundred years of contact and expansion and assimilation did not occur until later for many of the treaty tribes in the Pacific Northwest. And that's what we ended up becoming in 1855, almost a half a century after that European contact, was a treaty tribe. But during those treaty negotiations, our treaty chiefs bargained for and negotiated over that sacred agreement over smoke. And they very clearly rejected the government's tobacco and said, no, we are going to keep smoking our medicine. And then we're going to go back and consult on these decisions with our wives. And I think that really just kind of opens up the whole worldview and perspective of the balance that we had with the feminine divine spirit, as well as the powerful male spirit, and that they can't bring and make life unless they are in harmony and balance with each other. And in 1805, that was still very much a huge part of our history and our culture. And our men knew that in order for sustenance to occur, that our women, our sacred weavers, had to go out and harvest and gather the plants. And one of those plants was hemp. We had a very notable, I guess you could say, first written history of the Nez Perce interacting with the fibers as well as the smoke as early as 1805 during the Lewis and Clark expedition. So Lewis and Clark were lost brothers coming through our territory. And they were to the brink of, to the point of starvation, where they were eating their horses, and they were definitely lost. They didn't discover anything when they found us.
When you start eating your transportation, that's called desperation. Yes.
Yeah, so the Lewis and Clark expedition is the first and earliest noted history of the Nez Perce people having sacred healing with plant medicine, as well as using it as a textile for housing and for utility. And then in the 1830s, we had a lot of missionaries that were coming in and out of our homelands. In the 1830s, one of the missionary expeditions was broke, and they needed to raise some funds. So what they did was they took a large collection of Nez Perce woven female goods, baskets, cradle boards, and they shipped them back to a museum in Ohio that they were able to get $58.75 for all of these amazing, beautiful relics to help fund their missionary, their duties and responsibilities to be able to convert the Nez Perce people to Christianity. And what was really ironic about this is this collection, it came to light to the Nez Perce people in the 1990s that this collection actually existed. And a majority of this collection is hemp rope baskets or hemp made goods. And so Henry Spalding, the missionary during that time, he sold them for $58.75. And in 1997, the Nez Perce people did a massive fundraising campaign for over $600,000 to buy these materials back. So they're home. They've been repatriated to our homelands, but the stories that are woven within those fabrics, to be able to get emotional, to be able to sit back and look at those baskets and realize that, my ancestors, my great grandmothers knew how to go out and find these plants and collect them and find specific dyes to bring beautiful colors into them. It makes me realize that we have retained so much more than we've lost. And that's what I want our people to see now, is that we are not, the history of this nation really wants us to see ourselves as, that little glimmer of light when the sun is going down. That's that little glimmer of light, and that's us in this, dawning of light. But really, it's that little shimmer of light that we see is the sunrise. That little, and so that's what I like to really think, is that the light and the brightest of what we have ahead is for those unborn generations to come.
That is beautiful, Mary Jane. Wow. That is so touching to know. And it's so ridiculous in my mind that they had to pay for their artifacts back at 100 times of what it was sold for, that they never received the funds for, right? They didn't benefit from those funds. Forcing Christianity on them, I don't think that the native people would say that was a gift. So being able to look at artifacts, maybe jewelry, that my grandmother passed down to my mom and then to me, knowing that it comes from Trinidad, knowing they don't make that type of gold anymore. What is blowing my mind, knowing what it takes to turn the hemp plant into actual fabric or rope. I've seen it. I've seen ancient, pictures and images of ancient rope and fabric that was made from, some Chinese ancient artifact. But to think about these native people living off of the land, building machines that can turn this plant into material is just fascinating to me. And I'm sure that the Europeans minds were blown watching this process happen. And I'm sure that this technique has been passed down, which is also amazing. I'm sure that because it was so efficient and effective in making these beautiful materials for your ancestors, and knowing how strong and durable and reliable this fabric is, because it's one of the strongest fibers on the planet, that I'm sure that they still use some of those old ancient techniques to create this material. Okay, so before we get too far deep in further, I would like to make sure that we introduce our second guest that's going to be joining us today, Mr. Gary Dorr, who I'm so excited to meet. Mr. Dorr, welcome to Health is Wellness, Minorities for Medical Marijuana monthly webinar. Okay, we're going to give him a second to join us here. But Mr. Dorr is an amazing gentleman, from what I've read on his bio alone, that is a veteran, an Army veteran, I believe. And he is also the leader. I don't want to say the tribe name wrong, Mary Jane. Can you help me out here? He's executive director for
the Nimipu 54 organization.
Nimipu 54 organization. Nimipu. Okay, great. So thank you for that. So I'm we lost him. Okay, until our producer gets him back on, and I let Mr. Dorr introduce himself. Mary Jane, could you tell me a little bit more about why and how you founded Indigenous Cannabis Coalition? How did that come about?
Well, I've always grown up with a respect for the medicine, and I was raised in a household that had a very high value for the medicine. And also during that DARE era of, the war on drugs, my grandmother went to federal prison for growing cannabis when I was a little girl. And so I had a very, mixed upbringing of education, where there was the school education where, my parents had to train us to go to school on those DARE presentations. They're going to pull you aside. They may ask you questions, and actually, sadly, had to instill the fear in us that if we answered those correctly, that we may be taken away from our parents. And so there was this, this respect for it, because I saw the healing. I saw my dad, who was a severe alcoholic during my younger years, wean himself off of alcoholism and become a functioning, contributing member of society that was, just an amazing dad when he was not tied to his alcoholism. And it was the plant medicine that allowed him to be able to have that interface without the, feeling the need to have to go to the bottle. And so I saw that with my dad. I saw my grandfather, who was also a veteran, my mother's dad, utilized cannabis therapy. And so I saw great things happening with it. But at the same time, it took my grandmother and my grandfather away from me for over a year when I was just a small little girl. And so when I was working and living in Washington, D.C., doing education policy for the National Education Association, I was tunnel vision focused on education policy. And I moved back home to Idaho. And a year later, found out that tribes were left out of the Farm Bill. And I was just, I guess I was more upset with myself in realizing that in the capacity and in the place and the space and the people that I was connected with, we could have been doing that type of education at the same time. And so I really started to shift gears. At that time, I was doing a lot of soul searching. I moved back home to the reservation and I went to law school for a year, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about law, justice, lack thereof, and realizing that now tribes are having their lands raided across the nation while they're trying to cultivate hemp, doing the same thing that other people are doing, but the target was really on tribes. So elevating that voice between 14 and 18 to make sure that tribes were integrated into the Farm Bill. And that just was through advocacy and no formal organization. And it was not until 2019 when I decided that we need something more. I was interacting and interfacing with all of these amazing organizations. I was serving on the Minority Cannabis Business Association board of directors with some amazing colleagues. But even in that structure, it felt like Treaty Tribes 101, or having to do that education on what tribal sovereignty is with my peers, which was great because then they could carry that water forward for Indian country and on behalf of Indigenous rights. But I also realized that, I'm just one person, and just doing that, within that organization or within MCBA was great. But I also knew if we had an organization like MCBA or like Minorities for Medical Marijuana, who I also that same year became aware of, and working in nonprofit governance in the past, realized that that's really where we're going to get our most traction. We have a lot of internal education that needs to happen to eliminate the negative stigma, but we have so many strong allyships and accomplices to build. And so that's really where it started. In 2019, founded the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition to carry forward the work on supporting tribes in the protection of tribal sovereignty, elevating the Indigenous right, just the individual right, not a tribal right, not this monolithic tribe, but like the rights of the individual, basic human rights to be able to have healing of our own sovereign health choices. And that's for everybody. I don't care if you're purple, if you're pink, black, brown, yellow, all above the board, is that by raising that basic human right to heal with plant medicines conversation, that was universal.
I agree totally. And it's funny because your passion to create this organization was because of a lack of focus on your people, on your communities, and you being a representative of your community and being able to go out into your communities and talk to your people. I know how important that is, and that's why Roz created M for MM. She created M for MM under the same guise, understanding that there were organizations out here fighting to legalize cannabis, but were those voices actually penetrating into our communities? Not necessarily. And recognized how important it is for someone that looks like you to come into your community and be able to have these real and honest conversations and educate you, right? You have to be able to trust that person. And if they don't look like you, then it's a little bit harder for that trust to build up. Gary was on, and I think that he is having a little technical difficulties. So we're going to wait for him to come back on, but we're going to continue the conversation because Mary Jane, you have so much to offer us. And so I want to keep talking up. Is that him? Is he back? I hope so.
Drum roll for Gary.
I hope so. Certainly. Okay. So while the wheel is turning and we're waiting for him to come onto the screen, I'm so grateful that you created your coalition at the time that you did, to highlight and bring light to what was happening within the Indigenous community when it comes to cannabis and hemp. I know that recently there was something that happened. You told me on a sidebar that really, affected you, because now we are further down the timeline of understanding hemp and using plant as medicine, especially cannabis. And so you were saying that something happened to one of your elders in one of your communities most recently. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there was recently a raid on the Piqueria Pueblo. down in New Mexico. And it's just been really alarming. I know that it's caused a lot of concern for tribes across the nation because, for one, New Mexico has legalized cannabis. And
Medical
even prior
cannabis,
to
right?
that, the tribe had already amended their law and order code to align when they legalized for medical. And so within the reservation community and within the tribe's governance of their law and order code, they've already liberated their people. So to have the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is underneath the Department of Interior, come in and raid an elder's home who very openly admitted, I have my medicine growing with my vegetables, and the federal law enforcement officer let him know that that was going to be a problem. And so this was within the last 2 weeks that this raid has occurred. So of course, it's got tribes across the nation that are operating on federal trust lands. To hear straight, from the feds that it's still federally illegal and they're going to be enforcing the law, is definitely going to cause other tribes that are looking at economic development in cannabis to pump the brakes and really slow down any type of business plan that they may have in that direction, which is going to, of course, create a problem for the people and our health, in the fact that they're going to lack the access, or they're going to have to leave, their reservation communities to go to recreational places, that are not within their own community. And so the access issue, I think, is really at the end of the day where I see the feds' intervention becoming a really, really big problem.
Absolutely. We know what happens when you deny people, or when you remove such a vital plant from people having access to it. We watched the opioid crisis happen because cannabis was not available to people to help them manage pain. And for me, um, being a voice, or being a liaison, being an ally to our indigenous tribes and our indigenous communities is so important to me, because my people come from the Caribbean. My mother's from Trinidad and my father's from Dominica. And my father was a Rasta. And I understand how important it is, how connected the plant is, cannabis plant is, to the Rastafarian community. But I recognize that your ancestors very easily could have been my ancestors in and throughout the Caribbean, at the same time, or when, Christopher Columbus came to the Caribbean and did the same thing that he did here in the Americas. Isolate and massacre and try to remove these indigenous people from their lands and take it from them. And so that's my connection to understanding how important that plant is in your culture and within the communities and within your families, and for it to be forcibly removed or criminalized and demonized for using it. I have just a deep spiritual connection to that. And this past year, I've gotten more involved on a spiritual level with my ancestors. I've been able to communicate with them more clearly, which has been just a beautiful and amazing journey for me. I got my first ancestral reading back in January of this year, and it was life changing for me. No, it really was. And because growing up in a Catholic home, that I was just never exposed to that. I wasn't exposed to being able to communicate and talk with my ancestors and have that connection, because that's not what Christianity teaches you. And so I'm so grateful that your deep understanding of how this plant works comes from your ancestors. I so appreciate that, because I know how important it is to keep that connection going and to make sure that we're passing it on to the next generation. It looks like Gary is still having some trouble logging in here. I hate that, because I was so looking forward, excited about meeting him and hearing from him. So we're not done yet, Gary. You keep trying to get in. Roz will bring you on screen as soon as she can. But we're going to keep the conversation going, because we have a lot more to discuss. Mary Jane, can you tell us what happened with this elder? Like, is there anything that we can do? Is there anything that we can do to help with his plight? I mean, I know that there's a lot of gray area when it comes to, you know, federal land, sovereign land, and a lot of those words we might not understand. But can you tell us a little bit about maybe how we can help, if there is anything that we can do for this elder?
Yeah, well, one of the strongest things that everybody can do is just keep his family and community uplifted in prayer. The power of prayer is definitely a big factor in keeping our spirit moving forward when these types of depredations happen to the sacred sister plant. I'm sure that it was traumatic for him, having been a caretaker of his sister plants, to see them mutilated and to see them harmed, and he had a very specific purpose for them. So that is the first request that I would have. The second request that I have in helping this family is something that I have realized in the work that I'm doing that I needed to take more ownership of. And so the status quo, sadly, of what happens in our Indigenous communities when it comes to really important issues like this is is divide and conquer. And so we need to really speak forward for our tribes to be working together in this matter. And so I took a step back since this raid, and I've just been really looking at, okay, so we've got all of these other large, very reputable organizations like the National Indian Gaming Association, which is charged with the regulatory authority over the national gaming infrastructure. Very very heavy regulations to enter into that area. Then we also have the National Congress of American Indians. We have a lot of regional organizations, and so making sure that those organizations are working to protect tribal sovereignty in cannabis is one of those charges that I've been at their leadership, making sure that this issue is something that they actually get more vocal about, especially in light of this raid that's happened, because they have no guidance. And so for each tribe to just kind of be out there on their own trying to navigate this, we need more unity in the protection of tribal sovereignty in the plant medicine area. And so if you are, I guess you could say activist oriented, be on the lookout. We're going to be penning a letter that's going to be going to the Department of Interior. That is a sign-on letter that I think we should maybe even take it a step further and do it as a change.org petition as well, an online petition, so that not just Indigenous voice, but all voices, can speak towards the admonishing the Department of Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs for impeding on local traditional and cultural values of any tribe.
Okay, perfect. So you'll keep us informed. You'll let us know when that letter comes out so that we can, okay, perfect. Yes. Okay, great. So you hear that, allies and advocates. There's gonna be a letter that we can sign that will support this elder and other elders and other tribal communities that will come from protecting them to be able to grow their medicine. Gary, I'm so excited that you were able to join us and get back in.
Thank you
so much for being here. If you would please introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us who you are and the work, and tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
My colonial name is Gary Dorr. I'm Standing Red Bear. Most people call me Haji. I've been a land rights advocate for several years. I started when I was got out of college and worked for the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and I was a land services director. And then I went to work for my tribe as a feed trust specialist. So I'm very familiar with the land issues and the lack of rights and the lack of recognition that we have been receiving over the years. And when I was trying to log on here, I was thinking about that, because one of the things that Mary Jane was talking about, we never gave up these rights. Well, we never gave up the spectrum. None of this spectrum we've never given it up, but they're using it. We should own this spectrum that I'm broadcasting from. We should own that. So one of the things that I like to, and what Mary Jane is touching on with the land issues, is the fact that our treaty rights in the 1855 treaty area have never been put on the land title descriptions for our deeds to our land. So, like, I'm downtown Moscow right now because I can't get coverage at my house, but the sidewalks here, it's a right of way. It's in this coffee shop owner's land title description. But the 1855 treaty provisions have never been put into land title descriptions. We still own that. Just because they don't know about it doesn't mean they don't exist. And so that's kind of the work that I do. Is I bring this education about land issues, land rights, treaty rights to the forefront. I've been working with some relatives down in Colombia, working with different plant medicines down there. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the issues that Mary Jane is going through. We're still trying to bring ayahuasca here into the States as a medical ceremony, and it's illegal. We have one of our chiefs from Colombia who just got arrested earlier this year for bringing ayahuasca into the country. And that shouldn't be that way. That's a natural plant medicine. We also bring cocoa back. And the interesting thing about how the United States and how the world tests for cocaine is they test for the presence of the cocoa leaf. They don't test for cocaine. They test for the presence of the leaf. The leaf in its natural state is the most pure form of medicine. And so we have a lot of education to do that's left to do with educating the people, all the people, about what it is that we're doing and what we can bring to this world. Like 95% of all medicines come from the Amazon. They're plants.
They're
plants.
That's right. I'm with you, Gary. I am a plant medicine advocate myself, sir. And I, after being diagnosed with HIV in 2017, my ancestors spoke to me through my dreams and told me that I was going to be fine and I was going to heal using plant medicine. I was just telling our audience, I'm first generation American. My mother's from Trinidad and my father's from Dominica. And so that Caribbean heritage also is very much tied to the land. And so there's a lot of indigenous plants to that region that my ancestors used to heal their children and to heal themselves. And so I'm so grateful that you are going to be coming on today and talking to us a little bit more about these plant medicines, because you mentioned one of my favorites, ayahuasca. And it breaks my heart to know that someone, an elder, a shaman, someone got arrested because they had this plant on them and it was taken from them because I know that they were using it for the purpose of medicine. And all of you that are listening in and new to maybe the plant medicine world, maybe cannabis was, something that you're just learning about. This plant that I'm speaking of is called ayahuasca. It is indigenous and native to like Peru and other subtropical places on the planet. And so this plant, when boiled down into a tea, a tonic, you drink it and it gives the what happens that follows is undescribable with words. You really have to experience it. But what I can say about my experience with ayahuasca is that I was able to connect with my dad and my sister, who had recently become my ancestors. They both died in a car accident together. And having ayahuasca during that ceremony allowed me to connect with them in the spiritual plane, allowed us to go through the process of grief and forgiveness because they died on their way to my 25th birthday party in a car accident. And so I was never able to say goodbye. But using that plant medicine allowed me to connect with them in such a beautiful way that I was able to forgive myself, that I was able to hear from them that they forgave me and that they wanted me to keep doing what I was doing with this plant because they could see me and they could feel me. And so I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but I just wanted to share my own personal story when it comes to ayahuasca. I've only done it one time. It was in the summer of 2019, and it was life changing. It really, really was. And so I'm hoping, Gary, that you can share with us a little bit more about the plant medicines that you work with, that is indigenous to your people, your tribes that you work with, and explain to, because I know everybody's excited to hear about peyote. I know everybody wants to hear about peyote, because they
Mhm.
know and they recognize it as being a plant and part of the plant medicine that you all use as indigenous tribes. So could you tell us a little bit more about the plants that you work with and what they're used for?
Okay, so I mean, we have I guess the traditional medicines with like a bear root. It's like a bear root, but ours is different from everyone else's. It's cow or cows, and it's kind of a panacea. It's kind of like your vitamin C. It would be used for so many different things. And of course, I always tell people, like with the Forest Service, from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the valley, everything that's in there we use, whether it's the spruce for smudging, whether it's the sage that grows in the grass, whether it's biscuit root was what you would call it. We would call it, or we would call it cows. You would call it biscuit root, and it's one of the most powerful plants in the entire world. It's actually taken on rotavirus. It's taken on a virus and won. That's scientifically proven. So I have that. I have like batches of it in a tincture in this COVID environment, just because I know that is available to me. Um, I've also had the peyote, and so once you go to the peyote, once you sit through an entire night, which a lot of people can't do, you're considered a member of the Native American Church. Now, just to let you know, peyote has been approved for our use through the American Civil Liberties and Religious Freedom Act for a long time, a long time. And at my work, where I work, they said they had a meeting and they said, "Oh, well, if you're not on, we're going to have testing, and there's only one medicine that's been approved for, at a Schedule 5 level or whatever." And I said, "Excuse me, there's another one." And I didn't know if they tested for peyote, so I let them know, and I ended up in HR twice. Once, the second time was with the legal team's memo, because they asked me for a card, and I was like, "We don't have cards for Native American Church. You have to sit through it." And they kept wanting the card, and so I said, "We don't have cards." So when the legal team, when they went and Googled something, the first thing that came up was apply for a Native American Church or no, a peyote card. And they threw that at me literally across the desk. And I threw it back, and I was like, "That's the first thing that comes up when you search for peyote. That's for white people that aren't Native American, that don't have the rights that we have." So, this has been legal, and been legal in the military for like probably 30 years. And yet we still have people in our community that don't know. That's why we say we're still here. We are still here. We still have retained our rights. And that's basically what I bring to this fight is I guess the legal philosophy and the innovative approaches to combating the fact that we're not recognized. And like I've told you with that land title description, when you buy a piece of property, 1855 treaty provisions should be on there. We shouldn't have to worry about Bureau of Indian Affairs federal officers coming onto our land. It's tribal land, tribal individual members. Tribal rights, the Nez Perce tribe, has rights that are made up of individual rights of Indians, the people. The tribe does not exist without a fisherman, a hunter, a gatherer, a canoe maker. The tribe doesn't make stuff. The tribe doesn't hunt stuff. Individual Indians do. We retain those rights. The tribe doesn't. And the tribe's going to come in and try and regulate in some instances. And in other instances, you're going to have Bureau of Indian Affairs arresting people on reservations where marijuana has been approved. And
It's so
it's frustrating.
frustrating. I know. It's so frustrating. I've already asked Mary Jane. Of course, she has this letter that is coming out, and so I want to ask you the same thing, um, Haji. I wanted to ask you the same thing. What can we do as allies? What can we do as advocates as well? Is there anything that we could be doing to help bring awareness around this travesty? Because I'm confused as well. I don't understand how anybody from the federal government can come onto sovereign land and dictate anything. I thought that's why you all have your own communities, your own police, your own people that service your tribes. So what can we do to bring awareness to this?
Okay, so I'm going to link in the pipeline fights that are going on all over the United States.
Right.
We are raising awareness of the fact that these are tribal lands. We can't do that until we educate people. I live here in Moscow, Idaho. I'm about 45 minutes north of my reservation. I can't save the world. I can't change the world, but I can change one person's mind at a time. I've spoken up here at many. I've spoken at the law school. I've spoken at a couple of churches. I help out at a school. I talk to the parents. And I've actually had an Eastern Bloc parent, a Russian parent. The kids had an assignment to go home and find out whose land we're living on here in Moscow, Idaho. And this Eastern Bloc mother said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. All the Indians are dead." So imagine her surprise when I show up on the next Wednesday at Canoe Club and, oh, there's an Indian. Oh, they're not dead. So I would say for people to get involved, just to change one person's mind at a time, then I'd say it starts with the treaty. That's why my organization is Nimiku 5-4. 5-4 stands for the year before we signed the 1855 treaty. What did we look like? How did we act? What did we believe? Where did we go? What did we do in 1854 before we put our names to paper? What did we look like? So I would say for anyone that wants to be an advocate, no matter where you're living, it's tribal land in the United States. Find a treaty for the area where you're at. That treaty is your grandfather's agreement with us. We gave you rights in the treaty. We retained our rights. That's in almost every single treaty. We retained any rights that were not included in the treaty. So I would say as an advocate, learn what the treaty is. Learn how badly the United States is upholding their end of the bargain. Your states are violating our rights. Like here in Idaho, I say Idaho, but it's not actually Idaho. This is Nimiku country. They're the ones that are regulating us bringing stuff into our territory. If we bring a truck from Oregon across the border, they're going to come and arrest whoever's driving that truck with hemp or with cannabis or whatever it is we bring in. The states are imputing upon my sovereignty, upon my heritage of sovereignty on this land. So I would just say, as an advocate, I literally go any city in the United States, go to the nearest museum and find out what tribe was there, because it's all tribal land. Once you know their treaty, now you can speak with authority on behalf of the United States, because we are all heirs to the treaty. I say I can speak. I don't need the tribe to speak for me. I'm a sovereign man. My grandfathers all were there at the Treaty Council. When I speak, it's because I'm an heir to all the rights that were retained in the 1855 treaty. As Americans, as allies, if you know the treaty, you can speak to the fact that the United States is violating that. Then it comes across so much more powerfully because there's more non-tribal people than there are tribal.
No,
There's only 3,700 of us NISPers left. That's
right.
0.0000004% of the entire Earth's population. We're an endangered species.
Right. You're absolutely right. Especially when I think about how many of you were here when those colonizers got here. Gary, I mean, Mary Jane, you posted a link earlier in our convo that didn't get posted to the public. Is this a website that you can use to find out if you're on native land or where you are? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that land back website, as well as the phone number. If she posts the phone number, you can enter in your zip code.
okay.
And it will tell you the Indigenous people's homelands that you're on. So the
Okay.
indigenouscannabiscoalition.com is our website, but if you go to the www.native-land.ca, native-land.ca,
Yes.
and you can learn exactly whose Indigenous homelands of the people. And this is what is so beautiful about this type of a site, is that people realize they're still there. We are still here, not as relics of the past, but as vibrant living cultures today. Some of these areas, you know, I mean, most people have heard, you know, the whitewashed history of the Cherokee Trail of Tears. There are still Cherokee people occupying their Aboriginal homelands. They are not all in Indian Territory and, you know, Oklahoma. And so that's one of the other really, you know, critical things that happens through those types of recognitions, is not, you know, learning about who used to live on the lands. You learn who still lives there.
Who still lives there? Absolutely. And if we are, once we determine what land or whose native land we are actually living on, maybe make it a point to go find those tribes or find the people that are still living on the land. And I'm sure that a good way to do that would be to connect with native-land.ca, or connect with you, Mary Jane, because I'm sure, or you, Gary, because I'm sure you have connections to tribes all over the country.
Yep.
You guys have shared such a wealth of information with us today. You know, how, okay, we have a question from one of our listeners. How does one ally with the Indigenous Cannabis Coalition? Atlanta Normal would like to establish an active allyship with your organization. So how do we connect with you, Mary Jane? How do other organizations connect with you to be an ally and help you amplify the work that you're doing?
Well, to be able to build the resources for us to carry forward with the work, we've created an individual membership. So for $100 for the whole year, you can uplift and support the work that we're doing. We also have an organizational membership for $420, which organizations can help us with the costs and productions of THC Magazine, as well as acquiring the stories. I mean, print is not a cheap business to be in necessarily, but for us, it's about the preservation of Indigenous stories. So every issue is archived in the Library of Congress. We were able to feature Haji in our Indigenous Men in Cannabis issue and share story. And so our last tier is our THC Influencers. And so for $1,000 annually, you can support the work that we're doing. We are testifying in state legislatures on deference to tribal sovereignty. We are working with our organizational allies and accomplices for them to help support. And so Atlanta Normal would be a perfect partnership. There's definitely a lot of integration of the basic human rights to healing and plant medicine that we could be working together on in a unification of messaging. And so at indigenouscannabiscoalition.com, you can set those membership, the tiered membership. And I mean, we're just always open to partnering with organizations to provide consultations and speaking as well.
You could follow Mary Jane at
www.indigenouscannabiscoalition.com.
And Gary, please share with us maybe some organizations or how we can contact you and be an ally for you. If there are other organizations that are listening in and wanna be an ally, how can they do that to support you and the efforts you're doing?
Well, okay, so I'm not quite as far along as Mary Jane is, because I have like a full-time 9-to-5 job that I go to, so I'm not able to like jump right in like I want to. So all I have is my Facebook page right now, and I have a board. It's Ty Simpson, Jackson Oatman, and William Antel, all Nez Perce tribal members. One's from the legal and advocacy representative, one's from the youth, and one is from the natural resources and science background. So what we're we haven't really taken off yet, but I need to get a website up. So if anybody wants to set up a website for me, let me know. I'm on Nimiku54 on Facebook. And so basically what we are trying to do is propagate, protect, preserve, and promote the cultural heritage prior to 1855. So we do that through education, through actions, through, I guess, speaking engagements to let people know who it is that we are and what rights we have retained, which is, it's like the United States. If they said we're going to give up, the phone services, and we're going to let India handle our phone services. That's all they gave up. So it goes with us. We only gave up so many rights. The rest of them we retained.
And you know what? Gary's approach to the work that he's doing is absolutely phenomenal. A few weeks ago, we were very privileged and blessed to be amongst a group of young people in the harvest of the sacred cedar that will be taking to the water. And we're talking about a group of young non-native students and their parents that on a Sunday took their time to, hike to the top of a mountain because this fight for Mother Earth is so important to, to so many people. But you can teach an old dog new tricks. But Gary's integration of the youth, because what's happening now is really working intensively with these young people who are, they just already get it. They just already get it. And then they're going back and they're being that Indigenous ambassador to their families. And their families are extending that outwards. And we're talking about college professors, engineers from some of the local tech companies who send their children to these charter schools, and they're having this experience that they're not necessarily getting in the predominantly white public K-12 education system.
Wow.
So
wow. Many of them many of them do not like Thanksgiving now.
Right. Like me, I do not honor Thanksgiving at all. I stand with my Indian communities and tribes in honoring the National Day of Mourning. But just knowing that this month is Indigenous People Month, that is so important to me, for that to have be recognized on a national scale. You all have been such a joy. I want to have you back on because I feel like there's more that we need to discuss. Gary, M for MM, would love to help you with your website. So I'll get with you. And that's directly from the horse's mouth. That's from Roz, our founder. She would love to be able to help you get a landing page up so that people can contact you and you can get the support that you need for your organization, because you're doing such important work and we want to be able to support you in any way that we can. So
all right, sounds good.
I'll make sure I get your contact information and we'll get you the support that you need. You all, if you all are listening, thank you for joining us this day today. It was so great. Thank you, Lakeisha. And thank you all of you who joined us today. Our sister in Atlanta with Atlanta Normal. We just want to say, yes, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you all are doing. Thank you so much for the continued support and advocacy. Thank you for being the voice for your people and your ancestors. It's so important. Just a reminder, you all, American Indians, Indigenous people in this country are not dead. They are alive and well, and they are continuing to support the work of their ancestors, those memories alive as well. And so if you joined us today, that means it's important for you to be an ally as well. Thank you again to my guests, Mary Jane Oatman and Gary Dorr. Overwhelmed, over the moon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And all of you listening in, I hope you're giving thanks in every form of your life. Give gratitude. Tell your loved ones you love them. And remember, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, we support your efforts in trying to become a part of this billion-dollar global industry. Anything that we can do, please reach out. We are here to support you on your journey to wellness, as well as your journey into understanding the benefits of using this plant and all plants as medicine. Again, thank you to my guests. You all have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend, and we'll be talking to you soon. Stay blessed, everybody.